Well, China, Pakistan, and the USA was probably the ultimate triangular relation. As we know, triangular relationships tend to be difficult. They're never too easy. With the US, we have a very long history from the very inception, and it has had its ups and downs. It was used to be very strong in the 1950s and 60s, and I think Mr. Donald Lu exaggerates when he says that China is now the past and the US is the future. With a measly 101 million, I don't think they're going to supplant China. It seems a highly unrealistic desire. While Pakistan may not want to play bloc politics, and that's the stated policy, nevertheless, it's impossible for Pakistan. Just its financial requirements are such that it can't abandon China and go firmly in the lap of US. That too, when US is outsourcing its South Asia policy largely to India, which has not shown any inclination to be friendly with Pakistan.
I'm thinking we are their advice. So as friends, what would you like to advise them to do? These 2-3 things and get out of this mess. We can very clearly see that they are in a very difficult situation at the moment.
Watch Federal Post. Bold and independent.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Hassan Zafar with Talking Politics. I'm joined by Mr. Javed Hassan Saab. Javed Saab is an investment banker by training. He writes for Arab News on geopolitics and economics. Thank you very much, Javed Saab, for joining.
Thank you, Dr. Zafar, for having me.
Mr. Donald Lu makes a statement: China is past, USA is the future for Pakistan. How do you read this statement, sir?
Well, China, Pakistan, and the USA was probably the ultimate triangular relationship. As we know, triangular relationships tend to be difficult. They're never too easy. With the US, we have a very long history from the very inception, and it has had its ups and downs. It was used to be very strong in the 1950s and 60s. Then it's seen its downturn. Then it saw its revival in the 1980s, and then again after the War of Terror, in the War of Terror. But it's to a large extent been recently more of a transactional relationship. With China, it's been a far deeper relationship. It's been one that has been tested over time, and it's both strategic as well as commercial. Just if we look at it in terms of strategic, a lot of our defense needs are met from China. In fact, the nuclear program was assisted by China. Also, we have to say the trading relationship between China is twice as large as that with the US. In terms of exports, the US might be slightly higher than China. We export about 5 billion to US, whereas 3 billion to China. But we import a lot more from China than we do. And we import on a back of having credit swap lines with China. We have currency swap lines of approximately 4 billion. So it's a much deeper relationship. And I think Mr. Donald Lu exaggerates when he says that China is now the past and the US is the future. With a measly 101 million, I don't think they're going to supplant China.
But do you think that Mr. Lu has something greater in mind when he's making this statement vis-a-vis what is happening in the west of Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the Ukraine war, and the burning Middle East? So is there some kind of situation emerging that is likely to get Pakistan engaged in the West? And that is why he's making this statement in the larger geopolitical context.
I think there's a deep desire for Pakistan to take sides, to, as they say, in a world where there's increasing competition and now very open competition, rivalry between China and America. Ideally, the US would want us to be in the camp of the US versus China. That being said, it seems a highly unrealistic desire. While Pakistan may not want to play bloc politics, and that's the stated policy, nevertheless, it's impossible for Pakistan. Just its financial requirements are such that it can't abandon China and go firmly in the lap of US. That too, when US is outsourcing its South Asia policy largely to India, which has not shown any inclination to be friendly with Pakistan. Just the recent statements by Mr. Modi, the Prime Minister Modi, have been very belligerent towards Pakistan, and I can hardly see where India is the leading partner for the US to be Pakistan to play underdog to India. But I think that may be the desire, I can't say for certain, of the US, where Pakistan works with India in terms of countering China. But I genuinely think while there might be some individuals and some people, as they say in the establishment, who might have thought so or considered that, but the realities of Pakistan, if nothing else, the geographical realities of Pakistan work against that.
I think one more question pertaining to the geopolitical situation before we take a leap into the economic situation of Pakistan. And that question is the willingness of India to become an outpost of the United States in terms of an ally that is standing against China. But the things are not as simple as that, because China-India trade is really huge. And I don't know if the Indians are really up for escalating any kind of situation with the Chinese. On the other hand, Pakistan is a nuclear state that is under tremendous economic and political pressure, political pressure in the sense of political instability. So these two things together leave a very precarious choices for Pakistan, doesn't it?
Let's look at India and America and vis-a-vis China. While India plays along with America, India is very independent in the way it pursues its foreign policy, and we have seen recently their moves for a rapprochement with China. There were obviously tensions during the previous couple of years, especially pertaining to Ladakh. There was some friction there. There were actually hand-to-hand fights there. Casualties took place. But I think both China and India are seeing great merit in trying to play that down now. And there's been recently quite a lot of moves to improve the situation and put that behind them. For China, India is a very important trading partner. Just last year, they exported as much as 104 billion or thereabouts to India. India exports about 18 billion to China. So, you have a very large trading relationship between those two. India is looking for China to invest in technology, in auto production, in various other forms of production. So, and they are unlikely to get that kind of production investment, which creates jobs there from America. So I think India is very clever. It gives a lot of lip service to America. It also is part of Quad. But India has always managed to have multiple partners, so to speak. It's while it's very friendly with the states and says it has a strategic alliance. It at the same time buys oil from Russia, and you recently saw the bear hug between Mr. Putin and Prime Minister Modi, and many American commentators were.
That was a very warm hug between the two.
Yeah,
very warm hug between the two.
Absolutely, it was a warm, loving hug, and clearly showed that those two countries are not going to separate that easily. So
exactly.
But this political got the highest award in Moscow, the highest Russian state award.
But this political ménage à trois, US, China, Pakistan, as you said, the triangular relationship, it doesn't really seem to be getting any clear picture for us, because think of the BRICS position de-dollarization, as you mentioned, India and Russia together, and of course China in it. Is that putting some kind of pressure on the US? Because 25% of the world trade has been lost to other currencies other than dollar. Is that putting some kind of pressure on the USA to make this statement within that context? If we read Mr. Liu's statement, China is fast. I don't know if China is fast, but USA is certainly coming back into the picture, highlighting Pakistan.
You're absolutely right, Dr. Zafar. There's a lot of pressure on the US. They would like an encirclement of China. They would like to see China isolated and friendless. I think, but a lot of that is wishful thinking. Even Europe is very careful. They wanted Europe to abandon China, but you saw the president from Germany make his way to China with a whole delegation of senior corporate executives. So Germany is not undoing its relationships with China. China today comprises about 30% of global trade. It simply cannot be ignored. In fact, in terms of global trade, it is now the largest trading partner for most developing countries and many developed countries as well. So really, it is impossible to think that China can be kept back. And for Pakistan's interest, it would be very foolish of us, just when China is rising and it is now emerging as possibly the largest economy. In PPP terms, it's already the largest economy. In nominal terms, it might still be second to America. But in PPP terms, it's with that we should dilute or put it on a second tier to America, our relationship with China. So I think it would be folly. I think there was some insinuation by certain members of previous government, or more likely some members from the establishment, that suggested China is not as important. But I think that is behind us now, thankfully.
When so much is happening in the region around us and in the world at large, how are we? Our foreign policy is totally crippled by certain constraints that have been imposed on us, especially in terms of economy. And you are sitting in Islamabad right now. How do things look from where you are sitting at the moment?
I think,
I'm thinking, let me be a little bit more specific in terms of the political situation that is emerging in Islamabad, and of course the economic situation that you are very well aware of.
I think both are very important. There's always been, after the elections, a question of the legitimacy of the incumbent government. There's question marks about the election, how fair they were. This question has been raised in the US Congress. There are various people who have senators. This question has been raised recently in the UK Parliament. So there is question marks about the legitimacy. You probably have the most popular leader in jail and with questionable charges against him. Again, United Nations raised its objections to that. You also have had China, which has come and on now number of occasions said you need political stability. So where you have lack of political stability, it does not strengthen your hand in your relationship with third parties. When you have instability within your own country, you don't speak with a single voice, and that voice tends to be very unclear. And it doesn't give whoever is ruling the kind of strength to be able to speak with force to whoever your partners are. So that has huge implications for our relationships. So even those friends of ours, they might love Pakistan, they might think it's very important in terms of strategic relationship for the interest, but can they rely on a government which potentially is not going to be there in a couple of years, or its legitimacy is being questioned? Then we have the problem of economics. We are always on the brink of default. Our solvency is in question marks. Our credit rating is not the best. We have no access to international credit markets. Whenever we meet one of our friendly large countries like Saudi Arabia or China, we are inevitably there with a begging bowl of some sort, and that doesn't enhance your relationship. You hardly maintain strong friendships by constantly asking for favors. And now I think there's a certain amount of tiredness that is creeping into our relationships, and so we really have uh, shot ourselves in our foot, or in the foot, by our own ineptitude in how we have managed our finances, in how we have built these relationships. We are in a very important geopolitical, geostrategic position, but I think we have failed to utilize that. And while we may be an important country of 250 million people, we have put ourselves in a weak position, both due to political instability as well as economic instability, and that is very, very unfortunate. So I don't know which follows, but I personally think that we need to have clarity in terms of your politics. You need to have a government which there's no question marks about its legitimacy, and then you have a economic program which there's confidence in.
Yes, but it sounds like a chicken and egg story, whichever comes first. The economic situation has caused the political situation, or the political situation has caused the economic situation.
Yeah.
I think we can leave it to anybody's imagination to determine how
It
whatever
works.
comes first. Yes, but the important questions that emerge from your analysis, you mentioned uh, the role of the other nations, Saudi Arabia, China, and USA, and their reluctance to deal with the uh, government in Islamabad, whose legitimacy is being questioned, and that appears to be pretty much on a weak footing. On the other hand, we have seen the US Congress's resolution on Pakistani elections, and we have this the rumors of the meeting of the US ambassador with Mr. Imran Khan in Diyala jail. Everything is being downplayed in that regard. Why is that? You think it is also insignificant, the US Congress making a resolution, and they say it is just the lobby firms that are manipulating things in the US Capitol and other places?
I think it was a near unanimous resolution, with only a
Yes.
few Republican congressmen, women who did not vote. So having it near unanimous, it's difficult to imagine just a few lobby firms arranging that. It would have had to have effectively their establishments backing to make it such a unanimous resolution. It was clear
Mm.
messaging, and that has subsequently been followed by the congressional committee. We have Brad Sherman asked Donald New to talk to the Ambassador Bloom to meet Imran Khan in the prison. I think subsequently he has come on the Congress floor and repeated that he expects and has got some indications from Donald New that he's spoken to Ambassador Bloom that he'll be meeting the ex prime minister in jail. So I think there's much more to this rather than just optics. I think there is clear signaling going on that things cannot continue as before. They have been trying to put gentle pressure. Also, the attempt by the incumbent government to try and ban, or making noises about banning PTI, that has now subsided, apparently again on advice, and this advice I say in apostrophes, in inverted brackets, is because this probably is much more than advice, where they said do not go that way. So I think there is quite a lot of pressure now that is building up, and I think our partners, whether it be America or China or Saudi Arabia, they really want to see a stable, strong government which has popular support, because that will make it so much easier for them to deal with than something
Yes,
where
that's
they
that's
have
what
so much
anybody with a good
uncertainty about the
understanding.
future.
That's why anybody with a good understanding of the situation would like to think like. Nobody would like to see, even India, in my calculations, even India would not like to see a destabilized Pakistan. Why would they? I mean, imagine the kind of situation we have dealt with in Afghanistan, in our neighborhood. Why would any other country want to have a country of 250 million with nuclear arms in it? Why would anyone one want to see? So it is all of our own making, and the world is worried about it. Now, the question is, when the pressure is being put on Pakistan from the United States, is that pressure being felt?
I think in small way you can say the fact that having made a lot of noise and blustered about the fact that they'll be banning the largest possible party in the country, they appear to have backed down from that. So that's a pretty good indication that the pressure and the advisory note that has come from external quarters has an impact on Pakistan and its policy makers here. So I think given that we are on the cusp of getting another IMF loan, which is dependent not only on America, it is also dependent on financial assurance from friendly countries like China and Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates, that we will be very basically amenable to pressure from these countries. So, we have a number of pressure points that can be exerted on us, and that's unfortunate. We're not in a position where we can go our own way without having to listen to others. But in all fairness, all countries have to listen to each other. We're a global village, and in fact that's what people worry about. This is as you have put it very correctly, this is a nation of 250 million with nuclear arms, with a young population. Even India would be loath to see it unstable and subject to all sorts of instability.
Yeah, yes. So, because if we see from the Indian perspective, anyone in India thinking about destabilizing Pakistan must have seriously gone out of his mind if they are making any attempts towards doing that. Any sane mind would not want that to happen. And from the Pakistani perspective, the political things don't really seem to be getting back on track without any wherewithal. Because if we don't have the resources to bring the prices down, the IPPs issue, nothing can really change in this country. And this political situation remains problematic. You have seen in Islamabad the dharna of Jamaat Islami at the moment.
Absolutely.
How do you see this momentum building further?
Well, it remains to be seen, but I think if there's no political resolution through discussions or on the table, then I think people are likely to come on the street. There is widespread discontentment with inflation, with electricity bills, and taxation. And the problem is taxation, when it's done by what is known to be a very representative and legitimate government, is great. People tend to accept it. When there are question marks about the legitimacy, as the people say, it's a Form 47 taxation, that creates its own complications. And that really is the issue. It's in America, if you remember, it was no taxation without representation. So we are really living through times where people are saying this is not necessarily the most representative government, and yet it is imposing taxes, especially on the middle and urban classes, to a point where it's backbreaking. Many people cannot afford the kind of taxes that are being imposed, especially when you think it is coming in conjunction with electricity tariffs going up, where a family of two finds itself having to pay more in electricity bills than the earnings of the joint income. So we really are in a very precarious situation. I think people are beginning to talk about coming out on the streets. We are now beginning to see in Islamabad large numbers on the streets. There are various dharnas that are taking place. So I think we have seen in Bannu recently the kind of protests that took place. There are more and more protests that are taking place. And at some point, it becomes very difficult to suppress the people, no matter how strong the security apparatus is. So I think we need to be very mindful of this. And this is what the global partners of ours are very concerned about. They really would not want this to really break down to a point where it is street violence, and that's how it's getting resolved.
It doesn't look good to anyone, because if this economic distress translates into some kind of mass anger, things can be really out of control. So, given all these things together that we have discussed, what are the choices with the establishment to make?
It is
what are their options?
I would like to think that the establishment is an extremely patriotic force and wants the best of Pakistan, and would want all this resolved both in the political front and economic front. And they would want it to be done within the constitutional framework. That is what one's assumption is. And they should want to work towards it so that the political players resolve their problems as quickly as possible, have a legitimate powers taking authority, and they can then play their constitutional role, which gives them a lot of space to do a lot of things. So I think that is what I would imagine a patriotic establishment anywhere in the world to do.
Definitely.
It plays a positive role, and a role which helps the country.
I'm thinking we are their advisors. So as friends, what would you like to advise them to do? These 2-3 things and get out of this mess, because we can very clearly see that they are in a very difficult situation at the moment.
I would say, first of all, empower the judiciary and let the judiciary take its own course without any wish to influence the judiciary in any way. We have a competent senior judiciary, both in high courts and the Supreme Court. Let them act independently. Then from that, we should allow the political parties to act again independently, and also find that their representation truly reflects what the will of the people was on February 8th. And from there, the establishment, which has a huge amount of work on its plates in terms of dealing with terrorism, with counterinsurgency, with the threats on the borders, it can, what it would always probably want to do, play its constitutional role of defending the borders and ensuring that Pakistan is secure so that it can prosper economically. That is what one would advise the establishment, and to have as little a role in politics as possible. And I'm sure they do not want to have a role in politics. So that's what they tell us. So I would imagine, I take what people say on face value. So I would imagine that's what they should want to do.
I strongly believe that that is what they really want to do, and their primary concern, in my understanding, is the political and economic stability in Pakistan. And if any government is failing to deliver, that must be putting a lot of pressure on them, because it jeopardizes the national security in many ways. Javed Hassan Saab, thank you very much for joining me, and I would like to take your leave now. And thank you very much for watching. Take care. Good night.
Thank you, sir.
Pakistan.